Hi everyone. For this assignment, I decided to watch one of my favorite movies called Pretty Woman. It was released in 1990. This movie follows a prostitute named Vivian, played by Julia Roberts, and a wealthy businessman named Edward, who is played by Richard Gere. The plot of this movie is while on a business trip to Los Angeles, Edward meets Vivian and hires her to spend the week with him to accompany him to different business events. The two end up growing close during their time together and they start to fall for each other, but they're faced with the challenges that come with trying to bridge the gap between their two very different worlds. And I thought this was a very good film because it has the ability to make you laugh, but it also draws attention to real world problems that are a lot more emotional. It was really entertaining, and it's really a movie that I could watch over and over again. So, the four principles that I decided to point out from chapter 8 were actually really easy to find in this movie. The first one I did was turn taking, which is defined as when one person says something that triggers a thought or a memory in the other person who makes an utterance that follows up that of the first person. And an example of that in this movie is Philip Edwards' lawyer is left alone with Vivian at some point at the end of the movie, and the two start to talk, and Philip starts saying some kind of ignorant things to Vivian about her career, and it triggers a lot of feelings of guilt that she has about her job, and it ends up in the two of them having an altercation. So this was a good example of that. The next term I picked was display rules, which is prescriptions for what kind and amount of emotional expressions are appropriate. And an example of this from the film is Vivian and Edward end up agreeing that she'll spend the week with him. And once they do this, she ends up telling him her rules and laying them out front, saying that she doesn't kiss on the mouth when she's working because it's too personal. So they end up laying out their rules like right away. So I thought that was a good example. The next term I picked was compromise style. It means to handle power imbalances each partner gives and takes to bring power into the relationship back to the equilibrium. So there are kind of examples for both of them in this film. Edward ends up giving Vivian money to buy new and nicer clothes because she doesn't really have nice clothes, and she also gets lessons on etiquette so that she doesn't really stand out or look out of place during Edward's business events. And then Vivian kind of influences Edward because he starts to work less and take more of a break, and he also starts to stand up to his friends for making ignorant comments about Vivian's job after learning how it makes her feel. So both of their behaviors kind of start to change after they spend more time together. And the last term I picked was differences, similarities, dialect, which means acknowledges that relational partners share both similarities and differences, but the key is not to let the differences overshadow the similarities. So there's a specific scene that I thought of when I read this term, and it's when Vivian and Edward are both having conversations about their jobs, and they're from completely different fields, obviously, but they find out that they're more similar than they think, and Edward says to her in the movie, he says, "You and I are such similar creatures, Vivian. We both screw people for money." So I thought that that was kind of a cool way to think of it because they really are both so different, yet like they find that similarity even though they're from two different worlds. So that's all I have. Thank you so much for listening.